Okay, folks, here we are. Are we actually building far too many homes in Dundee? That's a question I often ask myself. That's a question I think is absolutely ludicrous. Really? Is that the case? Well, QVT, and let's find out. Okay, let's get down to it. I've actually got great stats here as well, Craig. I've got house prices in Dundee, average house price in Dundee, average rent in Dundee as well. What is the fastest appreciating property types in Dundee and Angus areas? So we'll be talking about them, including them in the conversation as well. But are we building too many homes? I mean, the issue of new house building in the UK probably stirs quite strong emotions here. But many believe their local areas are actually turning into construction zones with too many homes being built, disrupting the character of the towns and the villages. It's maybe a bit like NIMBY, not in my backyard, but it's like everybody goes on about we need to build more houses and more social housing, more affordable. But when it comes to their backyard, it's like, well, wait a minute, think about that. But I'll be honest, the perception is in grounded reality. I mean, the Labour government, we'll have to call them out here, came to power in summer of 2024 and set a bold new target of 300,000 homes every year for the next 5 years. That's 1.5 million new homes by the end of their tenure. Now, this figure actually sounds ambitious and perhaps a touch optimistic, dare I say. But when you consider that as a nation, we've averaged only 170,000 to 180,000 homes per year right over the UK over the last 2 decades. Kind of a tall order. Where are you going to get these resources from? The number and the stats and completions in context. Let's talk about them. Craig, what about the numbers, the starts, the completions, and the context to give us some idea where we are with this?
Yeah, so to run through the past 12 months, but I think, as you said, hugely ambitious target being set there from the current government, but especially based on the numbers. But we'll sit in hope. So in the last 12 months, the number of new homes has started and completed across the UK has fallen significantly short of the Labour government's current target, which will be probably no surprise. For instance, housing starts 100, so housings that have started construction, 134,570, as opposed to completions, then houses that have completed construction, 158,420. So what that tells us, or what this reveals,
that's
is
literally just half. That's half.
I think way off the target.
This reminds me of a conversation I had with my financial director quite a few years ago. And Brian was his name. And I went to Brian and he says, what do you think the forecast is for next year for the sales? And I said, I think I could double my sales next year. And Brian said to me with a straight face, before he chuckled to himself probably, with a straight face and says, okay, how do you think you're going to achieve double the amount of what you're doing just now? Have you got double the amount of employees? Have you got double the amount of resources? How do you think? Is there a market where you can actually do that? Is there demand for what you're talking about the double your sales? And that's what it kind of reminds me. It's like 300,000 a year, but you're only on 160,000 so far a year. And people will defend this and say, oh, it's a start, but literally you're trying to double it.
Yeah, I think, as you said, in these types of environments, how do you double your output in such a short space of time? And anyone in any background will tell you that's almost now
in an economy which is literally at full employment level of unemployment level about 4.4%, and that's classed as full employment because the 4.4% is generally just people moving from one job to the other and in between. So
Yeah.
if you've got nobody then to take the place, because you've sent them all back to Europe, let's be honest. I don't like getting political here, but it's obvious fact. It's not a political point. It's an obvious fact that we've sent a huge amount of resource back into Europe by the legislation and saying we don't want to be part of European Union anymore. So it's made it extremely difficult to have Labour into this country. And I don't mean Labour the party, but Labour the actual skill
Yeah,
we need
physical
to
labour.
build these houses. I mean, these figures really reveal the startling truth. I mean, we're building far fewer homes than we need, even as the housing crisis actually deepens. And to meet the government's goal, we must build 10.7 homes annually per 1,000 existing homes. Surely we're building enough new homes in Dundee, though. You know, when we look at the Dundee, because this is what we're on for, Craig. You know, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think some people are forgetting we're short of landing on an island at some point in here, but we'll see how this progresses. But despite concerns about overdevelopment in the Dundee area specifically, the data does tell a very different story. The UK is not building anywhere near enough homes to meet the needs of its growing population, which I'm sure comes as not much of a surprise.
Yeah.
Even independent studies show we must deliver at least 300,000 homes annually to address decades of undersupply and support demographic changes, such as longer life expectancies and smaller household sizes.
Mm.
So many people do
That's quite
say,
interesting because
well,
there's a rhetoric out there from just a minority group of people who actually say it's to do with the number of people coming in every year. But you've actually just pointed something out which is quite important here, and it's because people are living a lot longer. So if you've got about 250,000 a year, because that was the statistic, to actually keep up with demand, and the average age at that point in time with the 250,000 a year you've got to build is just say for sake 75 years old. And if people are living another 2 years on average, therefore you've now got to find another 500,000, which is the extra 2 years. When you think about the logic of that, don't you?
yeah,
Because you've got an extra
exactly.
2 years life expectancy, so you've automatically added another 500,000 onto that target. So it's no 250,000 anymore over the next 10 years. It's another 50,000 on top of that to take up the 500,000 for the extra 2 years that people are living, because they're
Yeah,
still in their house, so they're
make
no
up the
decanting
residual difference.
to allow the next generation to move into it. So this is what you've got to understand. And then when you talk about smaller household sizes as well, you're absolutely right. A lot of people are choosing to live independently as opposed to pooling the resources together. And you do get couples who actually live in different houses now, completely. But they've been kind of together for years and years and years, but they just quite happily decide to live in their separate houses. So there's that demographic as well at go overall. I mean, what would you say that many people are saying right now?
So I think the consensus, if you will, is that many people say we don't have the space to build these homes. As I did 2 minutes ago, we are at the end of the day an island. But would it surprise you that only 1.2% of England and Wales is actually built on with residential homes?
Doesn't
I think that's
surprise me.
very surprising, insanely surprising. And if we were to add to Scotland to that number or bring Scotland into that number, the percentage would tumble even further given
Even
the amount
further.
of free land.
I mean, it doesn't take a smart person to work out when you look at the map and you look at the size of Scotland compared to England, almost similar to a degree, but yet we've got a tenth of the population.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, there's an abundance of land there. And I heard at some point in time, literally you could take the whole population of the world and fit them into Australia. That's
I'd like to see somebody try.
yeah, but it's quite startling. And when you look at it in that context, I mean, people standing like that, there must be one of these elevators. You ever seen the elevators? You get in and you think, and it says we can accommodate 16 people, and you look, and there's only about 4 of you there, and you're like, how?
Not possible.
How is that possible that you could get 16 people in this elevator? We've got 4 here, and we're almost
Sardines.
full. Yeah. It's kind of like that. It's you actually think that. So what about Dundee then? What do people feel about Dundee?
So I think, given the amount of roadworks happening recently, many people would probably feel that Dundee does feel a bit like a building site overall. However, the statistics show, generally as a rule of thumb, Dundee is falling behind, not exceeding the levels required to maintain a healthy
Yeah.
housing market. And that's the key word, a healthy housing market. Visible developments often mask the fact that we are still underperforming nationally, as opposed to the rest of the areas. So we can look at the statistics for locality as such.
Okay. And so what are they? I mean, when you look at the statistics, what are they sort of? I mean, what does that pan out to?
So there are 70,409 homes in Dundee, and
Yep.
built, and 518 new homes were built last year. So to repeat, 70,409 homes in Dundee as an area, and 518 new homes were built last year.
That's
So the number of,
shocking.
yeah, scary number.
That's about 0.75% of
Yep,
of
quick
the
math from
of the
you.
current amount of homes. That's about 0.75% of the current homes that are actually in Dundee just now in the city. That's mental. So the number of Dundee homes built per thousand is round about over the past year is 7.36 per thousand homes. I mean, that's far below the benchmark required to alleviate these housing shortages.
Yeah.
This is actually quite interesting. Before we go on to talk about who's building these homes and where they're coming from, I actually looked at some of the statistics for the Dundee area. So the average house price in Dundee is actually 146,000 at this point in time. But do you know what the average? Well, in 146, and it's gone up since 2023. This time last year, or this is to 2024, by the way. That's how they collate the housing
Yeah.
statistics. It's sometimes a couple of months behind, but it's 146. It's not going to dramatically go up. It's not going to dramatically go down. But compared to that point on the year before, it's actually gone up only 2.2% from that point. And now that's a lot lower than Scotland itself, which is 4.7%. Interestingly enough, when you look at the rental level, the average rent in the Dundee area, the broad market rental area, is £828. It actually applies to Angus as well. So Angus and Dundee are pulled together for the rental broad market areas, and it's £828. I still don't understand where the Scottish Government gets like £1,100-1,200 as the average rent.
Mhm.
If Dundee itself is actually in Angus is 828, according to the proper statistics. And that means the annual increase in rental values up to December 2024, because they're collated a different way and they've got a bit more information, a bit more up to date. It's an annual increase in rents has actually gone up 7.2%. So significantly more than inflation, but not actually as much as you would think. So I kind of think the average rent, I kind of thought it would be higher, but in Scotland, apparently it's 6.9. So Dundee's actually faring a bit better, and for investors anyway, in terms of rent return, it's gone up. And then you look at the average value for a first-time buyer. So first-time buyers are actually paying 125,000 for their first house. You know, and I'm gonna go back to when I was a first-time buyer. I was lucky to be able to afford a £20,000 flat when I was a first-time buyer.
When
That's
was that, Jim?
That was probably 1988. So that was
Okay.
1988. But it's more affordable as a first-time buyer to buy a house now, believe it or not, and it's a fact, than it was in 1988. Because in 1988, interest rates were at 10%,
Yeah, much higher.
and they went up to 15%. So the percentage of your take-home pay, it was absorbed through mortgage or through rent, was significantly more in comparison to what it is today. You think you've got it worse today? If you'd lived in the 1980s, it would have been a different story. You would have seen it at 15% interest rates at one point in time. I remember that time. So it's quite interesting to see that for first-time buyers. So let me just recap. When we look at Angus, what's the average price for Angus? So the average house price in Angus is £173,000, a bit more. Angus people are obviously a bit more aspirational, a bit more higher socioeconomic group, or does it maybe take in a lot of tenement properties, the old style tenement properties in the Dundee area, Craig? Probably
I think
does.
a bit of a mixture. You've got different areas spreading across Angus as well. A lot of countryside that'll be
Yeah.
inflating the
So
price.
hence the reason why
of the
it's the
property.
average is a bit higher. But
Yeah.
Angus has actually fared quite well in comparison to Dundee. Dundee's gone up 2.2% on average price in house prices, but Angus has actually gone up 4.3%. So it's actually more near the average for Scotland itself. As I said, the rent is similar because it's the broad market rents over both areas. Instantly enough, first-time buyers in Angus pay an average of £141,000 on that, as opposed to 134 the year before, which is a 4.6% increase, a bit more than the average for the average house price overall in the Angus area. I wonder if I can find the percentage for, it's not here. Yeah, it is. Okay, 2.2% first time buyers. Let me see if I can see it. No. Yeah, first-time buyers was a bit higher in terms of percentage as well. When I look at the numbers, instantly enough, if you want to know the numbers for what's actually performing better in terms of price rises, in Dundee area, terraced houses are the highest appreciators in the last year. So the terraced houses, detached is the least. Wouldn't expect that, because right across Scotland, detached is the highest, but in Dundee, detached is actually the least appreciating in value in percentage terms.
Interesting.
Semi-detached is close behind the terraces, and flats is outperforming the detached overall, round about just about near enough 2%, but detached is about 1.2, 1.3%. In Angus, the best appreciator is, again, terraced. But it's interesting, detached is actually faring a lot better in terms of price rises, and semi-detached is in second place behind terrace. Detached is next. Oh, actually, flats is next. Detached. So it's a similar makeup, with terrace houses being the best appreciators in Dundee and Angus area. So is the semi-detached comes second. The flats and apartments are coming third, and the detached properties are actually coming fourth, which is actually quite surprising in consideration. And we'll talk more about Fife tomorrow. We'll talk more about what Fife is like tomorrow. But yeah, interesting numbers overall in terms of flats and maisonettes, going up 7.7% for that reason, and semi-detached is actually 5.9% on average. Now, so what does all this mean to anyone? I really that's really what this is all about. What's your thoughts on this? Where are we with this, Craig?
So I think, discussing the point that we made about 518 new homes built last year is far
Mhm.
from where we need to be to elevate housing shortages across the city. But really the question is, who's building all these homes? Where are the homes that are being built coming
Yeah.
from? So when breaking down the data, it is clear that new builds are heavily skewed towards the private sector in general, with the
Yeah.
private sector taking up 62% of that number. So going to housing associations, we then have 27% to break that down, and our local authority housing 11%. So that's when you break down how new build properties are going to the market. 62 for private. Oh, what are we seeing here?
So last year, then, if that's the case, with the new build properties that actually happened in Dundee, particularly in Dundee, only the council and the housing associations only built 197 houses for the whole of Dundee are affordable and affordable rents. That's what they built.
Doesn't seem like our fair share of the 300,000.
Now, let me just explain to everybody here that you need to actually understand that this is all about making sure the government lives up to the responsibility and not pass the buck and blame other groups of people for the very fact that they've not got enough homes. It's got nothing to do with the migration into this country, net migration being about 20,000 a year. It's got nothing to do with the fact that private landlords are buying up property, because the private landlord stock has actually dropped over the years. So that would mean owner occupiers would go up. So how is there still a homelessness issue? And it's primarily because the government has neglected over the years since 2006 to actually build enough social housing and affordable homes over the whole of Scotland since that time. That's almost 20 years of neglect. On average, for the whole of Scotland, the Scottish Government has presided over 7,500 houses every single year getting built for affordable homes and social rent. 7,500 for the whole of Scotland. That's 6 million people. 7,500 houses a year.
Just not feasible.
Yes. So where do you think the neglect has happened? It's not to do with the amount of people coming into our country and taking up these homes and taking up these jobs. It's not to do with anything else other than private sector. It's not to do with investors because that's declined. And that's just declined from where it was in 2016. It's got more to do with the very fact that the government has failed to take account and neglected to build affordable and social housing over the years to increase supply, to stabilise rents, because that's what it would have done, and also stabilise house prices.
Yep.
Okay, Craig. So that's basically it. So while private developers are actually dominating the market, like you said, the contribution from housing associations, and we've kind of got here written as modest, but it's pathetic. Pathetic is probably the word I would use.
Modest,
Pathetic.
very political.
Absolutely. However, local authorities' low number of new homes is frankly disappointing. I don't know if there's a worse word than disappointing. Probably even if you could find out that worse word than disappointing, probably that's what we should pin on them. This is a critical point. Without a greater push from the public sector, especially our local authorities, an affordable housing shortfall will continue to persist.
Yeah.
So why aren't we building enough homes then, Craig? Could you shed some light on this in the UK overall, in Scotland and England and Wales and Ireland?
So, a few reasons, but as you say, why aren't we building enough homes? So, there are several reasons for the gap between aspirations and reality, which we always know can be quite stark. Planning bottlenecks being one. Developers are held up by protracted planning processes, local oppositions, committees, many meetings to get property developments to go through. So, one of the main being planning bottlenecks and the time taken to get planning through. Secondly, land availability. Although we contradict that slightly, as you'll know, in Scotland, most of it is uninhabitable due to the rocky nature. So, land availability and a lack of suitable land, often tied up in green belts or agricultural use, limits where homes can legally be built.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one you touched on earlier, Jim.
I think the third one, the one you're just about to talk about now, is the major
Yep,
problem for the fact
I would
that
agree.
the lack of skills to build housing. So, what is that?
So yeah, I think you've the skills being the main one. So labor and material shortages, as came with Brexit, the departure of many people that had the skills to do these types of jobs, to build the property, to do the construction. So labor and material shortages post pandemic and post Brexit, the construction industry is struggling with a lack of skilled workers, and we all know rising material costs that have came with the post COVID era.
Do you know what? Do you know what it reminds me of? You ever seen that post where you've got the guy and he's sitting on a branch with his saw, and he's sawing away and going, "I'll show you." But he's actually sitting on the other side of the branch, which is going to fall off,
Yeah.
and the rest of it's still sitting there. That's kind of what we've done in terms of this labour shortages, material shortages, and we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot to a degree with the very fact that we've gone and I mean, we're out of Europe, and that's it. But we've never really got into a position where we've been able to negotiate better trade deals so far. I
No,
mean,
definitely not.
you've just got to ask yourself, and again, I'll probably be political about this. What happened to the £300 million a week it was on the battle bus of Boris Johnson? It was supposed to go to the NHS. It's actually cost £300 million a week so far.
Yeah.
So what
And the
does that
rest, most
say?
of the time. And the
So
rest.
it's interesting. Marcel actually said, "What exactly is the council system? How does it work?" Just to give you an idea, Marcel. So the council system is the council predict how many houses they actually need for the local authority. They work with planning. They also work with their budgets in order to ascertain, and they also work with the Scottish government, who allocates budgets as well for social and affordable housing. Unfortunately, the Scottish government cut their budget by 200 million to build affordable and social housing to contribute towards that, because the cost is prohibitive because of the standards that we've set. By the way, the standards that we've set ourselves for our housing requirements. So we've actually set these standards that are so high that we've got to use certain types of materials. We've got to do certain high quality insulation as well at the same time. Now, you could argue that's obviously for the future, but if you can't do it in the first place because you've set the bar so high, then what future have you got anyway? Just a question. Just, that's how I see it. What future have you got anyway if you can't even build the home because you've set the standards too high and it's unaffordable to build? Would it not be better to have an affordable home that somebody could actually have and have a roof over their head and have more of a supply and not have a homelessness issue than actually put the benchmark too high and just not have enough homes for people to have a roof over their head? I think the latter is probably the most important point. And the fact that more homes stabilise rents, they'll also stabilise the house prices as well, because you'll have more supply. Simple supply and demand economics, if anybody understands that. That's all it is, really. So that's really what it is, Marcel. Private equity, and I know you're going to say private equity, major hedge funds are crushing the hopes of ever owning home. Well, private equity and major hedge funds are actually building homes in this country. So you look, the build to rent generation, the corporates are actually getting involved in it, and they're building like I'm not really sure where you're from, but if you look at America, they're doing mass build operations. They're building big blocks places, and they're like 600 units at a time on build to rent. And that's what's happening in Scotland right now. Yeah, you're not in the States, that's fine. But just to give you an example, most people understand and have heard it from the people that are actually doing build to rent in these areas. You'll probably, wherever you are, you'll maybe see build to rent by the corporates as well, but they're actually creating new homes as a result. So the good thing is they create new homes, therefore there's more supply, therefore it stabilizes a market. That's the key here. Whether you choose to use that or not is a totally different story. And that tends to be the rhetoric of the Scottish government. But actually, at the same time in Scotland, they're actually trying to get rid of private landlords. So all they're doing is creating a new build to rent home, but then they're taking away, or they're getting rid of the private landlords, and the private landlords are then coming out of that rental market. So therefore, you're just trading one for the other. So you're almost spinning wheels. You're not actually creating any new homes to rent. And some people just genuinely want to rent. Or not everybody wants to own for various circumstances, whether it's short term, whether it's because they've got to go somewhere else for labour or anything like that. So these are all the different things they've got to think about. So you talked about that, Craig, about the labour material shortages post-pandemic and post-Brexit as well. Construction industry struggling, lack of skills. The fourth one that you're about to talk about, what is that all about?
Something that we've known for eternity, but a resistance to change.
Oh,
resistance
wow.
to change. Surprise, surprise.
Couldn't be talking about the government and the system and the council and the planning. Maybe that's something to do with resistance to change. When you mention that,
Definitely
it's
not.
funny. It's funny, as
No.
soon as you say resistance to change, that obviously comes to mind about planning, government, systems, all the rest of it. Yeah.
So yeah,
And
local. Oh, sorry. On you go.
no, on you go. No, absolutely. You're about to say it as well.
Local opposition to new developments is a significant barrier. So concerns over infrastructure, congestion, and loss of green spaces, which we have plenty of, dominate public discourse. As a
Yeah.
general rule of thumb on that one.
So I'm going to pin my colours to the mast and say it. The exact same people are probably resistance to change and going about their greenbelt spaces getting taken away are probably the exact same people that go on about the lack of affordable housing.
Yeah.
And affordable rental social housing as well, and council housing. Probably the same people. You can't have one and then and then have the other as well. It's not possible. You have to create more spaces in order to build. You can't build on existing sites that are there already if they're currently occupied and getting used. So you have to create it somewhere. And again, I say, and I'll challenge some people out there, it possibly comes back to NIMBYism. Not in my backyard. It's really all it does come down to. So what is the local impact then, Craig? How does this affect homeowners in Dundee?
Yeah, so bringing it back to Dundee and the locality of Dundee, for homeowners in Dundee, the lack of sufficient new builds has real consequences. Sorry. A restricted supply of homes contributes to higher prices, which we've seen, and limited options for buyers and renters. For those looking to move, the challenge isn't just finding a buyer, but finding and securing their next home to be able to make that deal happen.
Yeah.
Now, I think we'll all resonate, yourself included, that we understand the frustrations as someone deeply involved in the local Dundee property market. It's not just about the numbers, but how they affect people's lives in
People's
general.
lives.
So I encourage anyone who's curious about what these trends mean for their property journey, whether they're looking to sell, to buy, or understand the market better, to reach out to us. There's no obligation. We're here to help and guide and support with the local knowledge we've gained from years' experience in the industry.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing. It's you don't. I think it's a lot to do with you don't know what you don't know, and it's your job to find the person that does know. And once you find the person that does know, then it opens your eyes to a different view or a different aspect. You know how to look at something, especially when it comes to housing, and especially when it comes to social rent, especially when it comes to property investment, especially when it comes to home ownership or first-time buyers, or whether you're looking to move up, if you're looking to upscale, you're looking to downscale, you're looking to resize, you're looking to just get rid of some properties. I think it's all about getting the right information from the right people in the beginning. The way forward for me is ultimately to address the housing crisis. We really need a balanced approach here, empowering all local authorities and housing associations to build more affordable homes. My preference is actually local authorities, to be honest. I don't know how you see it, but I personally see housing associations as another connotation of a private landlord. So if you're not happy with private landlords, you're probably better going for local authority. Local authority have a different take on things as well. They tend to be more social in their outlook. If there's hard times, local authority seems to be more sympathetic towards that for people as well, and affordable accommodation. Plus, the local authority is actually looking to help vulnerable people where housing associations are targeting now mid-market rent people, which are earning £20,000 and £30,000 a year. Okay, how does that help vulnerable people from a housing association? It was set up to do that in the first place, diverting their resources from there to help people that really possibly don't need the help. Just a question to ask. Anyway, streamlining the Dundee planning system to reduce delays and create certainty for developers as well is really key here. And knowing where they are and being able to engage in the communities to find common ground between development and preserving local character as well. Probably the final one for me is supporting sustainable building practice to ensure new developments meet the needs of both current and future generations, but not putting the bar so high that it becomes so prohibitive and not cost effective to build at this point in time. Now, I know this because the local authorities are actually buying back ex-local authority properties from the private sector, from actually owner-occupiers, because they can't afford to build new properties, because the difference between a resale property, which is one that's already built and been around for years that people are living in at the average price, and the difference between a new build property is almost £120,000 in price because of the
Astronomical.
standards. Because of the standard. That's literally the price of the first time buyer. 120 grand is the difference between an existing property getting sold and the new build getting sold. What does that
Almost
tell
like
you
that.
straight away? Policy has to change. Building 300,000 homes a year is a steep climb. I'm always going to say that. That's almost impossible to get up there to build 300,000 a year. Maybe people will say support that opinion, that could be done. It possibly could be done, but it's going to take more than 5 years to get to that sort of level and actually create that sort of workforce and train that sort of workforce as well for the skills required to do that, and also get a hold of the materials in order to build all these properties that they want to build. Be interesting to see what happens at the end of the term, at the end of the 5 years. But it's one we must tackle head on, and if we're to meet our needs of future generations, especially for the people of Dundee. The question is not whether we're building too many homes, like we started off, but whether we're building enough homes. And the answer is quite clearly a resounding no. Now, I certainly know if we're building these extra homes in Dundee, the infrastructure alongside these new homes needs to rise as well. There's no doubt. You can't just say, let's build a whole lot of new homes, and then it's like, okay, if everybody moves into there, we're going to need bigger schools, we're going to need more classroom spaces, we're going to need more hospital beds potentially, because you've got more people that potentially could be ill proportionally when you think about it. You've got more roads because you've got more cars there. You need more petrol stations. You need more EV points. You need more gas and electricity into these operations. You need bigger interconnectors upgraded in order to provide that utility facility as well. So it's not just a case of going, yeah, let's just build new homes. Infrastructure is key here to accommodate for that. And that means then, obviously, more teachers are needed. Are we training enough teachers? More doctors are needed. Nurses are needed. Dentists are needed. We're doing none of that at all. I feel like I'm in a part of a political broadcast. But it's true. It's all the things that people have to think about. And you need to mention them here. We can't just talk about this in isolation, about build more houses. It'd be fantastic to build more houses. But other things have to be considered as well in the whole scope of things. So if anybody wants to have a wee chat of that and like to discuss it a wee bit further on the just the locality, the Dundee and Angus property market, by all means, give us a shout, drop us a line. Just message us. Stick your comments in as well when you get a chance. What's your thoughts on this? What's your thoughts on where the housing market's going? What's your thought? Because a lot of people think, oh, we're due for a correction. I can't see any correction coming anytime soon. Affordability levels are still there in these areas, especially in Dundee and Angus. When you look at these prices and look at the average salary in comparison to that, very, very affordable. These prices will continue to rise over the years as a result, because affordability is very good. They're not near enough at the level at where affordability then becomes difficult. It's usually 1 to 6. In other words, if you've got an average salary in an area of £30,000, the average price of a house, £180,000, that's 1 to 6. If it's anything less than that, you can bet your bottom dollar that price will continue to go up to get to that level. That's where it's always affordable. Now, I don't mean for a first-time buyer. What I do mean is for a person in a resale, in other words, upgrading, downgrading, or they're in and they're out. So feel free to give us a shout if you get a chance. There's a message on this post as well. You can message as well. If you're on YouTube, the guys on YouTube, if you're watching, stick something in the comments as well. You can ask questions. More than happy to take your questions as well later on YouTube if you're listening. If you're listening to the podcast on Anchor or Spotify or wherever podcasts go, I know on Spotify and they go on Anchor as well. Please feel free to message us direct. If you want our email address, it's info. You can do it at fifeproperties.co.uk. You could do info@dundeeproperties.co.uk. We'll get that as well. So more than happy to take your questions as well that way as well. Thanks for coming on, Craig. Final words? You got any final words? We're just done.
I think you've just done it great. Get in touch and together we can all navigate the challenges of the housing market with confidence and clarity. And I think that's what we're achieving here. So everything for me.
Textbook answer.
Yeah.
Okay, folks. Bye-bye for now.
Take care.